Hi everyone, welcome to the Racist War on Everything. We are on episode 200, so that's kind of hard to believe. It was just over 5 years ago that I started this podcast with Scratch, although we did call ourselves Black Sunrise at the time. We had an even more edgy name. So if you take that into account, we would have done 207 episodes, which really blows me away when I hear about other people who've done literally thousands and just how much work that involves. So anyway, to present this episode, you of course have your regulars, Fenian and Nolsey. But also, just to make it a bit of a more special episode for you, we've got Joel Davis as well. So yeah, Joel, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, great to be back on.
We loved having you on XYZ Live. We always got great feedback when we had you on there. And before we get into today's episode, I did want to say rest in peace to Shane McGowan from the Pogues, who died recently, about a day ago of, we're not even really sure. Take your pick with what ailments he may have suffered. But if you don't know who he is, he was the lead singer of the Pogues. They were a band that sort of crossed traditional Irish folk music with rock and punk rock. And yeah, I grew up with my dad listening to it, and it was pretty cool. And if anyone, is wondering who that disheveled Irish guy is in my avatar that I always use, well, that's him. That's Shane McGowan. I hope none of you thought it's actually me. As Syrian Girl did, she quite literally thought that was me in that picture. I thought, what, and you still agreed to come on the show? Anyway. All right.
You had Syrian Girl on the show?
Yeah, back. Trying to get her on recently.
You disavow.
I disavow. She needs to go back. Australia for the white man.
She will.
Well, yeah, I mean, she basically does. She says that if Syria becomes livable enough for her, she will move back there. I don't know. Well, we did put the interview up on YouTube. I reposted it because it had kind of been lost since Scratch left the racer. But no, I mean, look, definitely not all of the views conform to what we believe. For example, I was talking about taking away permanent residency or citizenship from ISIS fighters who also were dual citizens. And she's like, no, they were born in Australia, therefore they're Australia's responsibility, and we've got to take them in. So, yeah, we got some angry comments about that. What's that?
Yeah, her and Amy Therese are on the first boat out of here when we take power.
Yeah, I mean, just because she's she does do some good videos on Zionism and the terroristic founding of Israel, but yeah, she's got some other views that just really don't mix with ours.
Even if all her views were 100% correct, it wouldn't matter to me. It means nothing to me what her views are. Just have to take a principled stand, because the thing is, a lot of the discourse around Syrian Girl that you get from people in the scene is, oh, she's kind of cute though, and this kind of thing. And that's what makes it so pernicious. It's real easy to deport the ugly, Indian women or whatever. But the real test on whether you truly stand for your race is whether you're going to deport the okay-looking ones. You know what I mean? So I do not support the Berlusconi immigration policy of, I very much stand against it.
Bunga immigration. Yeah, I mean, well, look, you always just have to remember what Faith Goldie turned into. We've got a hot girl who's willing to say the 14 words, and then she's just nothing but a grifter in the end. So you've always got to be skeptical. All right, so let's get into it. We're gonna kick off today's episode with the continuing fallout over the High Court decision, which was indefinite detention in Australia is unlawful. So we know we've had a lot of kind of on-the-run policies being pushed through the Parliament by the Labor Party. So one of the most recent ones was a $255 million package to boost law enforcement. Now, this isn't just to do with the monitoring of what has actually grown now to be 141 people, and that will probably get bigger. But it's also funding, like, say, given to the Australian Border Force for to ramp up that form of security. Because, for example, we had 12 people arrive in Western Australia the other day, and they just came in on a fishing boat, and they're wondering, like, how the hell did they get that far without getting detected? So, yeah, this is sort of like one of these on the run policies. $88 million to the AFP. That will include funding to investigate breaches of visa conditions. So, look, the coalition basically said too little, too late with all this stuff. I would just say, I don't know, none of this is really going to make a difference. I don't think. It's all to do with illegal immigration and people meeting visa obligations. It doesn't do anything to actually stem the flow of people who are coming here in the first place. So,
yeah, again, like one of them's already slipped the noose already, of like, you know, jumped the coop. That actually now there's a manhunt in New South Wales for one of them that was actually meant to have an electric ankle monitor put on him, and has since gone missing, and has not had that monitor put on him.
Right.
Well, to me, I weighed in on this on Telegram earlier today because to me, it's just really convenient. I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy, but it is really convenient that this is now dominating the news headlines this week, just as, you know, everything has kind of died down from the referendum. Immigration started to kind of take centerpiece in the news cycle, the political news cycle. There's the cope from the mainstream media that, immigration has nothing to do with the housing crisis and this type of stuff. It really subsided, and acceptance started to kind of come into mainstream commentary that, well, actually we took in too many immigrants and that's why there's a housing crisis. And all the opinion polls are showing, they don't actually ask people about immigration in these opinion polls, what issues matter to them. Like, they don't even put immigration on the list. But the thing that comes first is cost of living, and the thing that comes second is housing crisis. And these are basically two things that are, if not exacerbated, outright caused by immigration. So obviously the kind of mass kind of dissatisfaction with immigration is at an all-time high, because we just took 600,000 people in a year, which is like triple our previous record. It's insane. Like, at per capita, it's like higher than like any other Western country except maybe Canada. And we've got the worst housing crisis of any developed country in the world, and so on. The list goes on. So the people are pissed, and this isn't a way for the coalition to position themselves as being tough on the immigration issue, because it's still within that spectrum of issues, but it's not actually dealing with, you know, the larger picture of immigration. They're able to focus specifically on, you know, illegal immigration becoming an issue again for the first time in like literally 10 years. Like, since Abbott got in on the Stop the Boats campaign, this was basically a non-issue for 10 years. Right now, all of a sudden, it just pops back up as an issue again. I just found it really convenient for the political theater to keep operating. Obviously, and also what I also found interesting about this is that it seems as though the Labor government really made it worse. I mean, I was listening to Dutton's arguments, and what Dutton was saying was that, yeah, the High Court decision was handed down, and so they portrayed it as if their hands were tied. But literally, he said all the immigration minister had to say during the case was that, we're still processing the application. We're still processing the case. You know, we haven't come to a decision yet. Then it wouldn't be indefinite detention. But she came out and said indefinite detention, so that forced the ruling. Secondarily, he said that case really only pertained to one individual, and that the release of the other 140 was rash. Like, they could have really like slowed that down and forced the court to decide on every single one if they wanted to. And so now they haven't even put ankle bracelets on some of them before they've released them, and they can't get bills through in time. They've created the crisis for themselves. And so, it almost seems like they've created it on purpose. And it's just like, why would they? Because it's obviously just making the government look stupid. So I don't know. It's again, I'm not
It's
necessarily
suspicious.
saying it's a conspiracy, but it is suspicious at the very least. They've concocted this distraction campaign. Obviously, the boomers sitting at home watching, Channel 9 News or Sky News, obviously they're going to be pissed off at the government. No one wants child rapists and so on running around the streets that aren't even supposed to be here in the first place because they're not even, they don't even have their papers. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. So, it's really easy to whip up public discontent around this. Obviously no one agrees that they should be allowed to the country except the nutcase lefties in the High Court. But nevertheless, this is a situation that we're dealing with. So it's interesting to observe. I don't think it'll be interesting. Do you think the Labour government will just continue to just self-deconstruct their legitimacy on purpose to give the coalition an easy win in the next election? Because at this point, it really seems as though it's almost like that they're just trying to screw themselves on purpose. And even though Peter Dutton is the ugliest dude I've ever seen in politics, he seems like he's just going to waltz into the prime ministership at the next election at this rate. I mean, the recent opinion polls show, two-party preferred. The latest news poll shows them 50-50, which is an incredible recovery considering how big the distance was at the beginning of the year. And at the same time, what we've seen from the Albanese government on the key issues that are losing them, the swing voters basically, is basically a stance that you just don't see reversing. Do you see the Labour government coming out halfway through the year and saying, we're shutting the borders and we're keeping I just don't see it. So to me, the Liberals don't even really have to do anything other than just be reactive to the news cycle, and they could waltz to an easy victory here. And it's difficult. It's really frustrating because, as I said, it's a way the Liberals are able to kind of simulate opposition without actually providing an actual opposition. And because the government is so bad, that's going to be enough for a lot of voters. And I really think in our scene, our messaging really has to focus upon attacking not just the Liberal Party, but also the One Nation Party, rather than focusing on, we've done a pretty good job of shitting on Albo all year and so on. But it's at this point, it's almost pointless. At this point, we really need to turn the heat up on the fake right, I think, in our messaging, because they're just being handed easy political victories. They don't even have to fight for it. They don't even have to make any concessions to the right, really, to even win at this point. They can just literally just react to the nonsense, whether it was the referendum. They were able, defending the status quo became a significant political act. And again, here, it's we probably don't want to release illegal, quote unquote, refugees, but illegal immigrant child rapists into the community. That's probably not a good thing to do. It's you win based upon that. It's not even fair. It's not even fair politically.
Yeah. It's time to cut the strings on the puppet show.
Yeah, but look, I said before that I very much think Albo could be a one-term prime minister, and that's basically because of a series of own goals. He obviously knows now that having the referendum and essentially announcing it at his victory speech was a miscalculation. And to the extent that Peter Dutton miscalculated was he didn't go in hard enough opposing the voice. And that's why, he's now saying, oh, well, Australians have had enough of the referendum cycle. Whereas before he said he was going to have a second referendum on it. So he didn't seem to kind of gauge the opposition out there to the voice and to other Indigenous issues broadly. So, yeah, he was just kind of letting Albo self-destruct. And now, we've got this crisis with the High Court decision, and he's not taking enough advantage of it. In other words, he's not pushing for a more restrictive immigration policy. Instead, what he's saying is just, you're letting us down on national security and letting a bunch of criminals go. He's not taking advantage of any of that stuff. So, if Dutton waltzes in as a result of all of this, he does need to have his feet held to the fire. And I'm kind of jumping around here a lot, but when you mentioned One Nation, Pauline's been going hard in with Israel as well. So now is also the time to criticize One Nation for essentially turning into a Zionist party, even though the original membership of One Nation was doxed by organised Jewry in Australia. They seem to have forgotten that.
Well, they haven't forgotten that. I think Pauline remembers that, and so that's why she makes sure
Mm.
she's on
Oh, well.
side.
Yeah, true.
But
All right.
also, I think when it comes to One Nation, just quickly while we're talking about immigration, they barely talk about immigration, even though it's literally like there's no better time politically than right now to come out against mass immigration. And they're talking about renewable energy, and they're talking about
Mm.
Israel, Palestine, and so on. It's like they just don't like, even they don't want to touch the issue, even though that's the issue everyone knows them for, and that's the issue that they win votes based upon. So it's just insane to me. Like, no one wants to touch the issue, even though it's sitting there as like a golden opportunity
Yeah,
politically
yeah,
to
no one will
just
take it.
win.
But look at our based Indian member.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll all cheer on Mark Latham for making a tweet about shit dick, but, at the same time, he was out there with, all those Indians the whole time. That was just vomit inducing. But yeah, just to go back to the High Court decision in terms of the amount of people that we've got out, it's said now to be 141. Now, a story that recently came out was that 138 of them have been confirmed to have had ankle bracelets attached to them by the Australian Federal Police. Three of them have not. And the ABC actually contacted the minister responsible and has received nothing back, that is Andrew Giles, explaining why three people don't have those bracelets on. So you did at least think that it'd be transparent about that kind of stuff. But also on the issue of ankle bracelets, I think we covered last week that there was already going to be a High Court challenge from Chinese lawyers. Well, now there's going to be one on the behalf of an Afghan refugee who apparently he wasn't in indefinite detention. He was already out in the community, albeit supervised. So he had been out of the community for about a year, and then all of a sudden they came in with the ankle bracelet because it turns out that the laws that they passed were blanket laws. They weren't means tested. It was just like, all right, everyone has to wear one, no matter what. And given that it was actually all seven justices of the High Court were in on this decision. By the way, it was unanimous. Shows that Labor should have been prepared for this, and also shows that they would be prepared to make another decision like this when it comes to ankle bracelets and other civil liberties that have been taken from them. So we may actually see this overturned, and it's just too
Oh,
little,
good.
too late again.
Bunch of unmonitored rapists. There we go.
Well, okay. On that note, one of the emergency measures they pushed through was to criminalize pedophiles loitering near schools, and the opposition actually voted against this measure. But the reason why is because they thought it didn't go far enough. And that caused Anika Wells to call Peter Dutton a pedophile protector. And Peter Dutton said he was hurt by the comments and that the minister should apologise. No apology was forthcoming, as you can imagine. I think it's always just stupid when a politician says, I was hurt by that. Like, it's just such a beta male thing to go and say that you're hurt. Just go out.
Fucking politics.
But in my opinion, though, I think that that's a smart move by Dutton in the political theater, because the impression that he is able to give is that the government are flailing, they're lashing out, they're being hysterical, and so on, and I think that's going to play well because you got to remember the way in which elections are really won is not by anyone who's a political partisan. They're won in the two-party system. They're won by the so-called swing voter, and the swing voter demographic, basically just like Gen X and boomer, television addicts. who have this moral sensibilities of, you know, a stay-at-home mom or some like corporate loser, or what have you. So that will play well, I think, with that demographic, this kind of political theater. I think it's just incredible. Like, the only way in which Peter Dutton can kind of come across as like a skillful politician is because he has the most incompetent opposition of all time. And a lot of people must be looking at this and thinking like, man, this is so unfair. Like, when I had my chance to run the Liberal Party or my chance to be in politics, it was actually hard. And then look at this like ugly loser that no one likes. Like, he's got like the easiest, he's been put in the easiest possible position.
How would Peter Costello feel?
Yeah.
I think he's always embittered Peter Costello whenever he sees this, because when Kevin Rudd started to slide in the polls, apparently he tried to get back into Parliament. He was really regretting like not taking on the Liberal leadership. But, I just wanted to talk about the reasons why the High Court made this decision. They were actually only just released, and that's how we knew that all 7 of them were involved in the decision. But it overturned the previous case of Al-Kateb, I think it was called. And it shows that they found that case to be incomplete and accordingly inaccurate, and suggesting that the indefinite detention was lawful because it made someone available for deportation at some later stage. So the judge has said the principle could not apply if other countries were not prepared to accept someone that Australia wanted to deport. Well, yeah. So also, we won't deport anyone who's facing the death penalty, hence why you've got that Malaysian hitman who can't be sent back either. But
which is changeable as well. I mean, like, and also the countries that won't accept the people that we're deporting, why are we not using any diplomatic leverage? Like, whenever Albanese goes to meet with the Indian prime minister or whatever, they have diplomatic leverage to force us to take immigrants. We don't even have enough leverage to force countries to take their own fucking people back. Other countries could force us to take their people, and we can't even force them to take their own people. I mean, it's insane. It's truly insane. I mean, we have the ability to even pay them and say, look, we'll pay you this much money to take this prisoner back, and we'll pay whatever it costs to imprison him in your own country or what have you. I mean, there just isn't any kind of real political will to do it. As I said, it almost feels like they just want to create this mess. And it's just like this unraveling where you could just imagine this causing a chain reaction of high court decisions that just releases more and more of them, and then the boats will start coming and they've got to let them in and so on. And I could just see them unleashing the illegal immigration issue again so that Dutton gets the Tony Abbott, layup.
Yeah, he needs to do a bit better than just 3-word slogans and whatnot. The other thing that was released here when it came to the High Court's reasoning was that we might remember that one of the other reasons that's given here is that a minister can't make a decision that is punitive, that is punishing someone. That is, according to the separation of powers, something that only the judiciary can do. So indefinite detention was said to be punitive. Therefore, the minister couldn't take that action. But that would mean that the court could. So it has been suggested that preventive detention, as opposed to indefinite detention, can be imposed. But that, of course, means that you must get a judge to make that decision. The minister can't unilaterally make that decision. So that's why the government now is racing to establish a preventative detention regime where, these people would have to be assessed on an individual basis, not on under a blanket scheme by a court, which, of course, would be a much longer and tedious process. But according to the High Court, that's the only way it is legal. Otherwise, you've got to go with these bloody ankle bracelets and curfews and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, it's just nonsense. Like as I said on the show before with Blair, if we really wanted to, we could just get the border force to blow up the boats.
Yeah.
Like, just, you got 5 minutes to turn around, or we're going to open fire. And you do that for a week or two, and there's no more boats that ever come ever again.
Yeah, give them a
If the
fun time
political
for
will
once.
was
How
there.
about that?
Yeah, I mean, like it is amazing that like Chinese intelligence services do a better job at extraditing Chinese criminals to China than Australia does. You know, they literally set up spy agencies in Australia to get them sent back to China, and they do a better job of that than we do. It, it is amazing. Okay.
Right,
Oh yeah.
next story.
Well, yeah. The last one I've got here under immigration was just related to what I was saying before about the preventative detention, which is they also want to make it that judges can strip citizenship and permanent residency from someone who is a dual citizen. Now, that's more related to another High Court decision, which was it was ruled that the stripping of the citizenship of Abdel Nasser Ben Brika, who was an Algerian guy, he was brought in on a multitude of terror charges. It was ruled that when Peter Dutton made that decision, when he was Home Affairs Minister back in 2020, again, it was a punitive decision, and a minister says is not said to be able to make a punishment. Only the court can do that. So Labor want to now kind of handball that over to the courts. Again, longer, tedious process, but the left have succeeded in the march through the institutions, and I would suspect, you would get a much kind of watered down version. I mean, if I could say anything good about Peter Dutton, it was the fact that he was willing to strip citizenship and permanent residency from people who were a national security risk. For example, that Bikey, the Rebels motorcycle president from Malta, he went on holiday in Malta, and then his PR was taken away by Peter Dutton, and that said he's been overseas ever since. Handing it over to a bunch of judges, especially if they're Victorian judges or whatever, like, yeah, I don't imagine the chances would be very good. They just get a slap on the wrist every time. Okay. So, I think two figures in the public service draw the ire of guys like ourselves, and that would be Mike Burgess, who's the head of ASIO, and Mike Pezzullo, who up until very recently was the head of Home Affairs. So Mike Pezzullo has actually been sacked. He was stood down with pay pending an investigation, and this was because he was getting chummy with a Liberal Party power broker. So there were texts that were leaked to the media and published. So those texts were him basically trying to exert influence on the cabinet process, on choosing who gets what portfolio. And he was basically saying that we needed more right-wingers in there. We needed more people from the more conservative faction of the Liberal Party, like Peter Dutton, as opposed to a Malcolm Turnbull or something. And look, despite that, so much of the shit that our guys have had to deal with over the past few years, coming from ASIO, coming from Home Affairs, being wiretapped and raided and surveilled, has been under the leadership of Mike Pezzullo, under the leadership of a guy who is supposedly some hardcore right-winger, which shows that, he just shows that even the deep state, those involved in it who are of the conservative bent, are still against us. They're not on the side of white nationalists wherever you go, which is another reason to make people think, well, look, don't go and opt for the one guy in that party who you think is based, because chances are he'll turn on you as well, and he'll gladly sign the paper to have your house raided. So, yeah, I can't say I'm very thrilled to see the back of him. I just think it's garbage in, garbage out. It'll just be the same.
Well, I think this is true in general when you get this a lot with again, the boomer conservative types, and they're not only boomers. Some of them can even be millennials. But the boomer mentality of Elbow needs to step down, or we need to get rid of this person or that person from the government. It's like the problem that we face is the entire political class and the ideology which they hold to, and uh, the political culture in general, which is self-reproducing. So it doesn't really matter which individual is put in one of these positions or who they're replaced by. It's all going to be more or less the same shit.
It's
As
the
you said,
entire
garbage in,
institution.
garbage out. Yeah, it's the entire political culture itself, which is why, like, our job is to basically attack the entire political culture rather than fixate upon individuals. There's a guy from the United States named Richard Hanania, and he has a lot of cringe takes. He used to be more closer to our position and now has pivoted more away from that since he's had more mainstream success and has become philo-Semitic and so on.
Oh,
But
God.
anyway, put all that to one side. He had a good article that he wrote a while ago called basically it was called "Conservatives Watch TV, Liberals Read." Obviously, this is the liberal in the American parlance, which just means leftist. And basically, he just went through all the data and studies and so on to discuss how basically conservatives get their worldview from television media, and they don't have very much written media, whereas the majority of the written media is consumed by leftists. And the point that he was making was that the left wing ideologically is cultural rather than personal. Like the left, it doesn't really matter who's in charge of the left. They don't glorify individual personalities in the same way that the right wing does, where the right wing has like the talk show host with an opinion and the Donald Trump. It's all about Trumpism. And what does Trumpism actually mean? Well, it doesn't matter. We just like him. This is right wing politics. We just like Tucker. We just like Trump. We just like XYZ. And this is why conservatives lose, because they are engaging in this very juvenile, immature politics of the personal rather than a politics of ideas, where liberals care about ideas. If anyone on the left wing goes against the ideas win and the individual gets excommunicated. That's why there's been so many people excommunicated from the left to the right in you don't really see anyone going in the opposite direction. Who leaves the right to join the left? Almost no one, because the left won't trust them. So, and this is why, whereas the right will be like, oh, well, this person seems to be saying stuff I like, so I'll accept them now, even though they're bringing with them all of this left-wing baggage. Like in America, I think of someone like Glenn Greenwald, who used to be on the left. He supported Bernie Sanders, but then defected across to Trump, the kind of Trumpian right or whatever. And there's heaps of people like this which exist across in Australian politics as well. The point that I'm making though is that this politics of the personal and it needs to go. We need to become like the left in the sense that we need to have a politics of ideas. That's the way in which you transform political cultures, because it's the impersonal political culture of the left self-reproduces because individuals are assessed by ideas. Well, on the right, it's like, we like this guy, we like that guy. There is a lack of ideological thinking in general. I mean, obviously on the far right, people like us, we have ideological thinking. We're more like leftists in that sense. But everyone other than us on the entire political right lacks this. And it's one of the key reasons. I mean, we can go through a whole series of reasons why conservatives always lose, but that's one of the main reasons.
The you got cancelled by the right people thing just sickens me, like, to my fucking core.
Well, do you remember, Nolsey, like last week we were talking about that, the culture of blame. This was in regards to the Optus CEO. I forget her name now, but the Jewish CEO. I do think that in Australia there's a tendency to blame the leader more than there is in other countries. All you have to do is look at the rotating door of prime ministerships and opposition leaders, for example, which only in recent years started to stabilise. But you can see it in other areas as well. Like when a footy team does badly, everyone calls for the coach to be sacked. When you have an outage, people call for the CEO to be sacked. You've had a similar thing with Qantas and everything. So I don't know, what is it, the tall poppy syndrome? That might have an effect
Crabs
here.
in a bucket, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
Again,
Okay.
I think that's basically the only reaction that people in this current state can have, because if you were to actually look or acknowledge the fact that there's a systematic problem from top to bottom, that would spur some conversations that are really, really not fucking comfortable to the zeitgeist.
So, if you're wondering specifically what Pezzullo was found of, you can imagine the inquiry found that he had broken the code of conduct, and that's why he's stepped down. And now we have Stephanie Foster who's taking over. Stephanie Foster, by the way, was one of the architects of the probe into what exactly happened with Brittany Higgins getting raped that night. So the investigation that was done prior to the court case. So yeah, I mean, don't expect anything better out of her. Anyway, Pezzullo was found, the breaches included using his duty, power, status, or authority to seek gain or benefit, engaged in gossip and disrespectful critique of ministers and public servants. I don't see anything wrong with that. Failed to maintain confidentiality of sensitive government information, failed to act apolitically in his employment. Well, come on, who actually upholds that one? Failed to disclose a conflict of interest. Do they really expect bureaucrats to act apolitically? There's just no such thing, I don't think.
Well, like, apolitically to them is being within their culture. As long as you're within their little band of culture, that's apolitical to them.
Man, government buildings always have gay flags outside them, and like they can't tell me that that is not a political message in some way, or all the shit for NAIDOC week and all that,
God.
They're all inherently political issues that they advertise and promote all the time, So it's ridiculous to then turn around and say you got to be apolitical in your service. Like,
you got to be apolitical. Go sit on this dildo.
Okay, we'll move on to the issue of climate and energy. And good old Chris Bowen has been making the media rounds a little bit more lately because we've got the COP20, whatever the bloody hell it is now. I don't know what it is. It's in Dubai. We seem to have one of these meetings like every month. It's just so hard to keep up with them. Anyway, depending on what publication you read, the Labour Party is either set to meet its 2030 targets, which basically just means reductions in emissions, or it's going to fail them. If you read the ABC, apparently they're on track. If you read the Australian, we're going to be right off track. The Australian would also argue, and I agree, that, well, that would actually be a good thing. It all just depends on how much of our coal plants we've shut down and how much green energy we've built in the meantime to be able to replace it. But anyway, so the data is showing that Australia's greenhouse emissions are to be 42% below 2005 levels by the end of the decade. And the overall goal, the 2030 goal that is that the government wants 82% of Australia's power to come from renewables, and that would be up 35 percentage points to what we use right now. And yeah, well, Nolsey, I guess you don't think we're going to meet that.
No. I was literally listening to the radio today, and they're talking about, like, oh, we're going to achieve these goals by bringing back battery manufacturing to this country.
Yes. Yeah.
What? In that span of time? Yeah, that's not fucking happening. Give us, like, 25 fucking years to do that.
The ABC was even saying that we need to give greater license to Chinese companies to mine more lithium so that we can, make all these products to store electricity. It's amazing. Like, actually give the state-owned companies here, like, more mining rights to supposedly fight climate change.
We've got the mineral sands, we just don't have the fucking means to turn them into a processed fucking product. At all. Period. And this is aside the fact from the physical amount of material we'll need to, like, strew across farmlands to make sure that solar power plants out in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere can supply urbanites. Like, this is the culmination of the bullshit we've been talking about for, what, more than a year now? Coming up 2 years?
Yeah, something like that.
And I
And
cry when I see a boomer post saying like, "Oh, this like fucking windmill needs like 40 liters of fucking oil." It's like, lady, I know like you're on the fucking same pathway, but like that's not the shot. The shot isn't the fucking windmill itself. The shot is everything from A to B, from the creation of that thing to the death of that thing to getting the electrons from there to here. That's the fucking dagger. That's the dagger in the back right there, and that's what no one considers.
yeah, well, the other thing that has to be taken into consideration is the amount of foreign capital that's willing to invest in all of this domestic green energy. So, what Chris Bowen has said that they're about to open up tender for a whole range of infrastructure green energy projects, but they can't guarantee that those companies that they're going to get enough investment from. Yeah, like I said, foreign capital is willing to invest here. So what Chris Bowen has done, and I think this is what you call moral hazard in economics, is basically say, well, look, if you come and take up one of these projects and you get it started, and you don't get the funding for it, you don't get enough people to invest in that project. Well, as the government, what we'll do is we'll just bail you out. We'll just pay for the rest. So you've got that safety net there. And it was interesting to see. I watched the interview with him on Insiders where he was trying to justify this. And he was saying that, no, that was just to give those businesses enough confidence to start up the projects in the first place. He said without that government guarantee, basically none of those projects would get started because too many of them would be afraid of the lack of foreign investment. So that is just another way of siphoning even more tax dollars into green energy without it being part of the official figure. It's just a bailout instead.
Also, by the way, that's not like that's not a safety net or anything like that. That is going to happen. I absolutely
Of
fucking
course it will.
guarantee you that is going to happen. Um, I mean, put it this way, like at the end of the day, like is it some fucking private company that puts up the power lines? Well, they repair them today, but they didn't put them up originally.
Right. Yeah. It was all a government monopoly originally, but now it's all kind of these public-private partnerships that they do. Well, look, Bowen has also said that nuclear power definitely will not be part of the mix.
Get fucked.
And I love this. I just highlighted this quote here, which was, when I talk to my international counterparts, many of them say to me, oh, geez, if I had your renewables, I wouldn't be doing nuclear. So apparently Australia is the envy of the world in terms of our green energy technology. And that just means, no, we don't need nuclear at all.
I'm sorry.
And we've got so much fucking uranium sitting in the desert.
Right. Yeah. Don't other countries actually look over and say, hey, if I had that much uranium, I'd be mining it and using it?
Oh, no, because we mine it.
Too.
It's a byproduct of mineral sands, by the way. We mine it and we
sell
send it to
India.
other fucking countries.
We send it to other countries who are non-signatories to the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. We sell them to like countries that are nuclear armed, and we do nothing with it ourselves.
Man, I do love paying like 28 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah. So
I think in France, they about 80% of their total electricity generation is through nuclear power, and they have some of the cheapest energy prices in Europe. So when people say, oh, nuclear, that's not viable economically or something, it's like, well, actually we have an ostensible counterfactual. We can say in France, bang, it works. Now, can you point me to a country that has like 80% renewable energy, where they got cheap energy prices? No.
So like Germany
it's just total bullshit. Whenever you hear the anti-nuclear kind of fear mongering in terms of like whether it comes to safety or economic viability, it's all bullshit. Like nuclear works fine. I mean, I don't believe in global warming. I say let's burn the coal, but no ladies.
Heard it here first, lads. Joel Davis says burn the coal.
Yeah, no, I support I suppose we should throw all the coal burners in the coal reactors. There we go. We can.
There we go.
It's like meta.
That works.
It's meta burning. But yeah, no. But the thing is, I don't believe in global warming. I think we should burn the coal. I think we should natural gas it up. We should natural gas the and so on. But but also let's build a few nuclear reactors. Why not? I mean, create some jobs. It seems kind of cool. But the new phase 4 reactors or whatever that they're building in France, I mean, they almost have no nuclear waste. It's incredible how much the technology has developed in nuclear reactors. The thing is, with nuclear, though, it requires a lot of state investment to get off the ground, a big initial investment. But once you get it going, then it becomes very cost effective. So that actually would require a government with vision, to think, 5, 10, 20 years ahead. We don't have a government that can even think 2 weeks ahead at this point. So, I mean, that's never going to happen. But to me, all of this issue, like, I don't really care about the energy policy of this country if everyone becomes an Indian. So to me, I think we really have to reduce the issue to race, because the overarching, context to this is global warming, climate change, and so on. And I think we can reduce the climate change issue to a race issue by saying, well, it just seems like it's only white countries that are subjected to deindustrialization and the sabotage of our entire energy industry by this agenda. No one is calling for India to stop building coal power stations. No one's calling for China to stop building coal power stations. Whenever they propose an international agreement about how to fix global warming, it just basically means white countries giving non-white countries free stuff. We just had that Pakistani woman who got elected into the Senate on the Greens ticket, who just gave a speech to the Senate recently, where she went back to Pakistan and people are poor in Pakistan, and somehow that's because Australians have caused global warming, so we need to give Pakistan free money or something, free shit. I mean, it's just totally insane. We've got to take climate refugees from Tuvalu, apparently, and all this nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
So climate change is just a political stick to beat white people with. They don't actually care about climate change. If they really believed in it, then wouldn't they demand that the Indians stop building coal power stations? Wouldn't they stop importing third world populations into the first world? Studies show that third world immigrants to the first world increase their carbon footprint by 5 times. That's a quintuple increase.
Yep.
They don't. And if we're going to go to net zero, how are we going to double the population by 2060 or whatever it is? I mean, none of these policies make sense unless you just understand them all through the purview of they're all just excuses for fucking over white people. So I think, to me, that's kind of how I approach the issue when I talk to normies. And the thing is, a lot of people don't actually believe in global warming. Like, when I rant about global warming, I don't have to really convince a lot of people, like the inner city urbanite leftists, whatever. You actually have to have an argument. But I find that the majority of, your Aussie battlers or whatever don't actually believe in it, despite all of the gaslighting. That I find that to be quite interesting. But moreover, it also shows, again, the weakness of the conservatives. Like we talked about the Stop the Boats election. But the Stop the Boats election had 2 major things. It was Stop the Boats, and it was fuck the carbon tax. What did Tony Abbott say? Coal is good for humanity, Tony said. And he won the election on that. So that shows that, like, the right wing, the majority of right wingers don't believe in global warming. The Liberal Party trying to fall over itself to be like, oh, yes, we've got to win back the teal voters. Oh, yes, no, we care about global warming just as much as the Labour Party. That doesn't fly. Like, they still blame, like the people who care about global warming don't believe you. They're against you. They think the right wing doesn't believe in global warming. They stand with the coal miners. They stand with the fossil fuel industry. And so just double down on it. Just team up with the fossil fuel industry. Let them pay for your election campaigns. And just go hard on the issue if you want to win politically. And just the right doesn't actually want to fight. If they go to the fossil fuel industry and they say, hey, look, if we go against immigration, that means we're not going to get all this money from all these Jewish property developers, but we can get rid of the entire green energy agenda if we win. So can you guys fund the campaign? And we'll be digging as much coal as you want, Gina Reinhart. We'll be building 50 coal power stations our first year in power. Fund us into power. We're going to kick the Indians out, and we're going to burn the coal, that would actually be a viable political strategy. If they wanted to win, if they actually cared about right-wing issues, if they wanted to actually do what right-wing voters want them to do, but they don't want to, right? They're fucking fake and gay. So that's how I try to approach the issue. I think I agree with what you guys are saying. Like the technical arguments, you guys are 100% right on. But to me, it's like almost like I don't know. I just want to inject racism into the discussion.
Yeah,
Always welcome to do so.
Yeah, I think it was Maureen Faruqi. I think you were talking about the Pakistani woman, and Pauline Hanson said she should piss off back to Pakistan. I think on 2 occasions.
I'll take you to the airport.
Yeah, she's facing.
I got the rope right here.
Oh yeah, that's right. When you mentioned France's nuclear grid, like Germany is said to be the leader when it comes to green energy. Well, they actually purchase energy from France's nuclear grid because they can't make enough themselves. All right, so they have to actually rely on France for that excess of power. So
Germany's big winner is the fact that they have such a sophisticated electrical grid that they can basically distribute power from one side of the country to another without major losses. Like that's their one actual superpower. And they like to say like, oh, on a windy day, Germany exports energy. It's like, yeah, you export like a fucking loose kilowatt because you don't want to have to transfer it through the substation because they'll blow it up because you're importing more energy from France.
Right. All right. So we have a story here concerning the former Minister Joel Fitzgibbon, who was also the member for Hunter. He retired at the last election. So he was giving a speech to forestry industry leaders, and this was about a promise that the ALP has actually fulfilled since winning office, which was to reverse the funding cuts to the Environmental Defender's Office. Now, what that is essentially a government organization dedicated to litigating and engaging in environmental lawfare. We've covered a lot of those stories before, like, for example, say taking a superannuation company to court because they invest in fossil fuels. And that case was successful, by the way. So this is $10 million. And he said here that what this amounts to is effectively the government funding litigants to sue the government. It's like, here's some money, can you please sue us? Because very often it's the government, because they're the ones who give the okay for a new plant or whatever it might be. And these people have had a lot of success. The Green Movement has been very, very good at using the courts to overturn decisions and get their way.
Here's a bag of hammers, use them to bust my balls.
Well, here's $10 million, so you can fund even more of that stuff. So, I think Joel's right. Joel Fitzgibbon. All right. Well, so we do have a new gas agreement as well. So this is 2 new deals that have been signed by the federal government and 2 major gas companies. So that's Cenex and Australia Pacific LNG. So, did you hear about this one, Nolsey?
Yeah, I did. One of the impetuses for putting this forward was actually keeping the Ragnarok on our country.
Right.
The Ragnarok is one of the larger off-sea gas platforms / ship.
Yep.
So yeah, that's.
But it's also there. I mean, gas sort of is the fossil fuel safety net, isn't it? Because our number one enemy is coal, so we have to resort to using more gas.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, again, show me your solar farm, show me your wind farm, and I'll show you the LNG generator.
Right, but then at the same time, we've got to remove gas appliances from the kitchen and turn them all electric. Because that's the weird thing.
I rant on that about that again. Holy shit!
It seems like the government is schizophrenic on this stuff. Like, on the one hand, because they put a new tax on gas as well, But when they're shutting down like coal mines and coal fire stations, we obviously know that during the transitory period, from going to fossil fuels to renewables, we have to have something to actually get us there in the meantime. And we're pretty much in broad agreement that that is gas. Yet they keep, taxing it and putting in these ridiculous policies like you can't even have a gas cooker in a new house in the ACT, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, like again, it's not access to resources is not about you. That's like the big thing you should take away from this. Like, it's not about having gas for your own home. It's not having gas for small industries. It's making sure there's no brownouts and we can still sell it to overseas markets.
Right, but with that, we are going to get the blackouts and brownouts, and I would say that there's a good chance that's actually going to happen now. I mean, today's first day of summer. We've seen the forecasts. They reckon this is going to be an absolute stinker. Perth has already gone through a heat wave. It went through it in spring, and we've had bushfires and that. People are going to be using their aircon a lot, and I'm getting text messages on my phone from like my electricity company. Yeah, saying things like, remember, you can put your aircon to 24 and save money. They're sending stuff like that. I got that one like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, oh, okay.
Imagine cohabitating with a woman from colder climates and telling her that, like, it has to stay at 24, baby, I'm sorry. And not getting the absolute shit kicked out of you.
Yeah. Oh, you have a non-white girlfriend, don't you? That's why.
Yeah, she's African, yeah.
For those who don't know, she's Irish.
Black Irish.
But look, when we were saying that, the outages with Optus, that was sort of like an early sign of a regressing civilization. Well, something else is blackouts, brownouts, as we've seen in South Africa. They've gotten a lot of those. And I think it's only a matter of time until it starts here. Now, obviously, it's to do mainly with the green energy transition, but it's also just our workforce becoming less and less white all the time. So, yeah, interesting days ahead.
Conversations that will not be had until there's a rolling blackout for 3 days.
Right.
And at that time, the time for arguments is over. It's the time to start cracking skulls and eating brains, I guess.
Jeez. Okay. So we've actually got Albanese government struck a deal with the Greens. And this is, as we always have to do these water deals when it comes to the Murray-Darling Basin. Yeah. So this is said to see more than 700 gigalitres used for farmers each year. And that's allocated to the environment through the Commonwealth buybacks scheme. It's been going on for a long time. Now, that includes $100 million allocated to help First Nations people participate in the water market.
Oh, fuck. No.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
They always have to. I mean, I've never heard the term like Aboriginal corporation used so much. And it seems like whenever there's any kind of major funding announcement from the government, there's like a certain percentage of it set aside so that First Nations groups can profit from it or have a stake in it in some way. And now it's including the bloody Murray-Darling. Now, related to that, I don't know if you guys remember Peter Van. Peter Van is the guy who was said to have sexually assaulted Lydia Thorpe. So, I can't remember exactly what he was accused of. But look,
Joel's back in advocating for coal burning.
No, not in it. No, I mean, I'm just joking. Obviously, I mean,
no.
I mean, Lydia Thorpe's pretty much white. I mean, come on, it's all fake tan.
Oh, dude, have you fucking seen the photos when she's a kid? Oh my god, she could have been in like a 1950s commercial for lollipops.
Oh, you just have to look at the photos of her just before she went to the Senate. She just looks white. But she did a Stan Grant, and I think she was sleeping overnight in the solariums. But she did something to make herself look darker, definitely.
Oh yeah.
But Peter Van, because he had to leave the Liberal Party. No one had even heard of this guy before. But of course, he had to leave the Liberal Party because of that sex scandal. So he's now an independent. And part of how they got that Murray-Darling Basin deal through the Senate was with his cooperation. So now he's in discussions with other Labor ministers about other contentious legislation. So more stuff on the environment. Also stuff on the closing the loopholes bill, which I think we'll discuss later. It's an industrial relations bill that, look, I don't think that's going to get... I mean, what?
Dude, you'd kill the entire fucking industry, unfortunately, putting that through.
Putting
how
the
much
closing,
of the... Yeah.
closing the loopholes bill?
Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah, look, we have talked about that one before, and yeah, we've got it coming up. But look, we're at the very end of the year now. I just don't think it's going to happen. David Pocock and Jackie Lambie as well basically said they want to delay it till next year. That's partly because they complain about not having enough parliamentary staffers. They say they're understaffed. But yeah, Labor have been wanting to push at least most of this through before the end of the year. And there's a chance they'll get more of it through, not all of it, but more of it with David Van on board, because I think he is actually one of these disgruntled independents who has a grudge against his old party for not standing up for him. You know, he's like, now the whole country thinks I touched up Lydia Thorpe and you weren't there to defend me. I can see why he'd have a grudge and why you'd want to take part in a bit of sabotage of your former party in that way.
Yeah, that accusation would get me there too.
Okay, so we've finally seen some climate change protesters be fined. So this was, they took part in a 30-hour blockade of the world's largest coal port at the weekend. 65-year-old and a 23-year-old. That's a generational gap. But they were part of more than 100 people charged in connection to that. This was at Newcastle Harbour. So, yeah, they're having like little small losses here. But look, if this was 100 white nationalists taking part in a blockade, I'm pretty sure all 100 would be in jail, not just two of us fined, So they're hardly throwing the book at these people.
Well, again, it's like the same deal with the tire slashes from like, what was it, a year ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, here's oh god, you did such a protest. You stayed out on pontoons for like 30 hours on 2-hour rotations. Yeah, like, oh god, here's your big slap on the wrist.
Yeah, or when they burned down the front of Old Parliament House.
Yep.
You know how many people were arrested for arson on that? 1. Even though there is clear video footage that you can just pop on YouTube to go and see, where you can see people doing things like breaking up wooden chairs and then throwing it on the fire, doing stuff like that. Like, there was at least 10 people with their faces clearly showing, and they only got 1 person on arson. Even though they caused, what was it, like $200,000 worth of damage? It was a big bill they racked up.
I was going to say, Finian, I think we're dangerously close to a 2-tier justice system.
Oh, are we? Dangerously close.
Yeah.
Okay.
God, it's too much to fucking deal with sometimes.
Oh, now, here's actually where you've got what is sort of like a contradiction within the environmental movement. So, a tribunal has overturned a requirement for a proposed wind farm to shut down for 5 months each year in order for it to protect the migrating orange-bellied parrots. So we do often hear that these wind farms, take out a lot of birds and stuff.
They do.
So, yeah, so you've got people, like in the renewable energy side, but then people on the conservation side who are actually conflicted here. Like, you've got to take out a few birds in order to fund your green energy.
Those megawatts, yeah. Well, the thing is there that people forget that air is sticky. That's like how, planes fly, turbines roll, etc. That's because air is sticky. So when you introduce something like in the aviation industry, we used to call it prop wash. If you have like a lot of props or propellers in a location, you'll basically create like a vacuum that kind of sucks neighboring air into it. So those birds, being like low mass creatures, they don't even need to be flying through the area. They can just literally be dragged into that area, into the prop zone, and yeah, killed.
Right. It is always funny though. Like, I know this is sort of just this isn't the right approach, but when you look at a lot of environmental policies, they do often end up having kind of the opposite effect of what they're intended to do. And I mean, even when you just look at like the vegan movement, when they say you should only eat, such and such food, you actually look at the amount of animals, like for
Oh
example,
yeah.
insects that are killed in like the production of grain and vegetables and fruit. You're basically you're moving from slaughtering a few species to just
Do you want
slaughtering other
numbers?
species. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So actually I got into this argument a while ago with a Tash Petersonite. Probably was about 4 weeks ago at this point. And he was pissed because like family has a dairy farming background, etc. And I was like, look, at one station we'll roll over about like a good station will roll over about 4,000 head of cattle a year. So I was referring to a station in the dairy belt. And I was like, okay, that same area, I believe it was 60 square kilometers. You go to the wheat belt and just look at the population of European shorthairs that are bagged and tagged in that area.
How much?
25,000.
Jeez.
25. That's just European shorthairs, by the way. That's little cute little bunny rabbits, you know? Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's just one fucking species. And again, like, it was used on Yellowstone, etc. Like and it's true. If you go to the agricultural region, not only do they have a sluice built into most combines to deal with like when a combine throws grain up in the air, grain's quite light and low density, but viscera and gore is a little bit like more medium density, so you can separate it out by height. So there's a sluice to deal with the dead meat matter that comes from actually troweling a field and dealing with all the ground burrowing mammals and marsupials. Um, that's why crows, yes, do congregate around combines.
Yeah, and vegans do actually believe that animal lives are sacred. Like you might remember that story, that woman who didn't kill her pubic lice, for example. She let them live.
But I think that shows, like, when it comes to quote unquote environmentalism, the two issues you think of are basically the, whatever you want to call it, the anti-climate change kind of thing, and veganism. But climate change is fake, and coal is actually good for the environment. I was in Sweden recently, and it's interesting how the anti global warming, green energy thing is even a bigger deal to them than it is to Australians or in the Swedish political system. And it's like, imagine waking up in Sweden one day thinking, you know what, it's way too fucking hot here. You know what I mean? We got to cool off with this CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't a couple extra degrees kind of help out? But anyway, yeah, these two things are totally incoherent. Like, environmentalism should be about environmental conservation, which neither
Hmm.
veganism nor climate change has anything to do with whatsoever. But they redirect all this energy from conservationism into these other two pursuits, which are fundamentally incoherent and stupid, and, as you say, actually cause more damage than they solve.
Yeah.
If we're going to build wind farms everywhere and so on, and everyone's going to live off grains and rice and shit like that. So yeah, it just shows the incoherence of these positions. And is there really much going on with real environmentalism at this point? I mean, yeah, you often see them protest against fracking and this kind of thing, but I feel like the fracking thing is motivated less by the environmental cost of it, and it's motivated more by the overarching kind of anti-climate change, anti-fossil fuels thing. There isn't really a great deal of environmentalism that I can see that focuses on like that classic conservationist lens anymore. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but that doesn't really get any of the headlines. That doesn't really have a very strong public-facing movement. And there's nothing about it which is really left or right-wing coded. I mean, I think if you talked about environmental conservation, I think you probably get an equal amount of concern from right-wingers and left-wingers. It's a non-partisan thing, but because it's totally hijacked by these partisan issues or these silly issues, obviously there's a lot of opposition to veganism, and global warming or climate change is a controversial issue. It's just completely left out almost entirely. Like I remember when we used to have international disputes with the Japanese over like their whaling and things like that. You don't really see even that kind of discourse anymore. People used to be very passionate about saving the whales and this kind of shit. Now all of that energy really does seem to be directed and fixated upon climate change. So it's a shame, really, because the environment is what's actually losing, because there is just a lack of political organization and energy. Organizations like Greenpeace and so on, they're diverting so many of their resources to fossil fuel politics or energy politics that there really isn't much left for what actually matters.
Yeah, slash and burn for my fucking kale field, or slash and burn for my solar farm.
Well, I know one of the founders of Greenpeace is actually an advocate for nuclear power, and he disavowed Greenpeace like decades ago. Just saying that,
with the Sierra Group.
Well, he said that originally, Greenpeace were actually just more of a conservation group, and then as Joel said, they just got absolutely obsessed with climate change and emissions and everything. That wasn't really the way they were founded. But I think definitely the issue of conservation is something that crosses party lines, and where they differ is just simply how you actually implement a form of conservation. And someone who actually did a good job on this was Steve Irwin. Now, I don't I think he put out this ridiculous kind of caricature of what the average Aussie is like. Like we all wrestle crocodiles or whatever. But
we're better for it. Everyone loves them.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe. But I just found him irritating as well. But he actually just used his wealth to buy up a shitload of land, a lot of wildlife that he wanted to preserve. So he said, all right, well, I can actually just buy it and I can look after it. And he did a good job of it. And, I'm not necessarily making the libertarian, private property argument here. But it does show how there's a vast array of ways you can conserve the environment. And that doesn't mean we all have to stop burning coal and gas.
Everyone likes bilbies. You're lying if you don't.
Okay, so look, just a quick story here on cybersecurity. And I'm sorry, guys, I put the wrong link into the prep here. But this was on, a new accord that is been agreed to with Australia's banks and other financial institutions. This is about basically sharing information on scammers. So they want to more closely coordinate to prevent people from getting ripped off. Now, we all know that these scams are becoming more numerous. They're becoming better organized as well, as they tend to be sweeping through Asia at the moment and not just Africa. So one of the drawbacks here, but it's absolutely it's a sacrifice worth making, is that certain transactions that are made, particularly those that involve a lot of money, would be slowed down. Okay, it would take a bit longer for one transaction to be approved. But that's fine because, I think there's some true horror stories out there, like people who have lost hundreds and thousands, sometimes over $1 million in retirement savings, because, they do tend to be old people, they're less tech savvy and all of that. So,
I had one call that asked me to press a button if I was over 50. I'm not joking.
Yeah, well, look, if they they want to coordinate in that way, as long as it's not a form of business collusion, I think that's a good thing. Because,
Yeah.
we definitely do need to crack down more on them. But we need to start actually saying in our bilateral relations with other countries, can you please put your fucking scammers in jail? Because the fact that so many of them are operating out of call centers means that you're just letting it happen. You're barely enforcing the law at all when it comes to
Oh,
rounding up these people.
dude, fucking like there was that one guy like Scam Stopper or whatever the fuck his name was on YouTube, and he literally like reported to the Indian police. I was like, I've got their location, I've got all these records of actually them like committing fraud in your country, by the like by the black and white definition of fraud. Can you stop them? And they're like, oh yeah, we'll get onto it. And then months passed. And he comes back and says like, oh, has there been like any like thing? And also he's hacked into their fucking IP cameras, so he's looking at them, and so he knows it hasn't. And he's like, oh yeah, we've got a detective. Da 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 da. It's only when he turned around and then like literally like got into their like fucking work Excel spreadsheets and figured out they're also committing tax fraud that anything fucking happened. They don't fucking give a shit. And any law that protects us from third world predation, fine. I love it.
Well, look, that's why, it shouldn't be a carrot and a stick approach. It should just be all stick. Like we basically need to say there will be financial sanctions on you if you don't clean up all of this stuff, which is operating right under your nose. All these countries, like Bangladesh, for example, where they run this, there is basically no policing of it whatsoever. Yeah. Oh, look, we did the Optus thing last week. So, look, let's move on to Israel and Gaza. So, Marine Faruqi, everyone's favorite Pakistani Green senator, so she removed an Instagram post that had her pictured with 6 students from the Strike for Palestine Day. I think that was last Friday. There's probably more of them planned as well. So, she originally had this caption that she was with courageous students will lead the way for justice for Palestine, even when their Labour government won't. So, I don't know, does this show that the Labour government is sort of just towing the middle line here? Because Peter Dutton, on the one hand, is saying they're not doing enough to curb the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia. But then, on the other hand, you've got the Greens saying that they're letting the Palestinians down in terms of human rights. It's a fine act that they've got to juggle here.
Again, this has been said multiple times. Why the fuck is this happening in my country?
Yeah, I know. I mean, look, I'll still, me and you went to one of the protests, and I'll still go out there and protest because it's something I believe in and everything. But yeah, I mean, when I was just looking around at the crowd, and I don't just mean the amount of like headscarves and turbans and everything that I could see, but man, the amount of fucking trannies as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was.
It's like, do you guys know what Hamas would do to you?
And rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I saw more trannies there than I saw at the fucking tranny march.
Mm. Yeah.
God damn.
No, I honestly think. Well, I mean, look, it was hard to tell, but I think I saw more trannies there than the drag queen event.
Yeah,
that just tended to be freaks, like, and you couldn't tell if they were trannies or if they were just dressing up like a woman for the occasion. But yeah, it was amazing, and you could even see like some of the Muslims were like staring at them, just thinking like what are you?
What are you?
What kind of fucking creature are you? And why do you have an interest in this? So like, all right,
this is why I have a staunch religion.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think about that, Joel, in terms of like, even though like I assume, you're sort of supporting Palestine and etc., but the very fact that we have these diaspora groups that live in such large numbers in the West, where they take their politics here and they essentially have no interest in Australian politics or Australian identity whatsoever. Like, to the extent that we have globalization, it's not like one monoculture is subsuming the earth. It's actually just that all of our cultures are moving to different geographical locations and clashing with each other, which is what we've got here, and that's what's fueling the so-called rise of anti-Semitism in Australia.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was one of the main rationales of the White Australia policy. It wasn't simply to maintain Australia's racial purity. I mean, that obviously was part of it. But it was also to avoid precisely this, to avoid ethnic conflict. I mean, maybe it was a bit of a cheeky, kind of classic Aussie cheekiness, but one of the main reasons given for not admitting Jews into Australia prior to the Second World War was that we didn't want to have any anti-Semitism in Australia. So no Jews, no anti-Semitism. That was literally what they would say. And I get that's a little cheeky, but I mean, there's a logic to it, you know. I've been making this argument too lately as well, that like the only way really to eliminate racism is to move all the races into separate countries. And then if there's only one race around you, then you can't be racist, right? So
Right.
That's really the only way to solve racism. Otherwise, it's inevitable. But yeah, but when it comes to the Palestine issue, I mean, you were mentioning the trannies for Palestine or whatever. It's an interesting dynamic because I've seen people accusing me of trying to hijack the pro-Palestinian movement with white nationalism. Now, I'm not part of the pro-Palestinian movement, as I said publicly. I just hate Israel. I'm going to weigh in on what's going on. I'll say, well,
I was
bad for Israel. I think
it
it this way or that way, or what, or I disagree with this or that Zionist narrative, and so on. I mean, the Palestinians fighting for their homeland, I can sympathize, from a human level, but I don't see it as my problem. I'm a white man fighting for my homeland. So, I don't have any time really to care that much about the plight of the Palestinians. But at the same time, I can look at the issue objectively and call a spade a spade. But so apparently some of the things that I said about the issue on streams or online got spread around the pro-Palestinian circles without them realizing that I'm a white nationalist. And then some, other people were like, hey, that guy's a Nazi or whatever. So it caused some controversy. Some stuff got sent to me, or I saw some things about this. And I said, I'm not trying to hijack anything. But you know who is trying to hijack the pro-Palestinian movement? The commies. The Palestinians have absolutely no interest in gay marriage or gay rights or trans rights or any of this nonsense whatsoever. Where there's some gay rights and trans rights and so on in the Middle East? Israel. That's probably it's the gayest. I mean, Tel Aviv is literally the gayest city in the world, according to Israeli media. You can be a tranny. You can do all kinds of horrible sodomite nonsense in Israel to your heart's content. Not really that permissible in the rest of the Middle East. Now, who's the one hijacking who? And the other thing that you get as well, I mean, when you talk to actual, like, normal, politically activated, not just Palestinians, but just in general, like Muslims from the region, not the kind of Muslims who go to the West because they're a closeted homosexual and they want to come be degenerate in the West, or they feel oppressed in their country or whatever, but like the normal ones, by their standards, they're all not just anti-Zionists, they're anti-Semites, or they're not anti-Semites, they are Semites, but they're anti-Jewish, like they don't just dislike Israel, they dislike Jews. They understand that Jews control the West very clearly. For example, Osama bin Laden very clearly understood that Jews control America. It's a common understanding with Iranians, with Arabs and so on. They know the score. So they hate all Jews in general. They hate Jewry. They don't just have a problem with Zionism. Now, whereas the communists, they say, well, there's nothing wrong with the problem is Zionism, but there's good Jews, there's good communist Jews, globalist Jews who don't support the Zionist occupation. I mean, if we look at the opinion polls, Australian Jewry is the most Zionist element of the Jewish diaspora in the world. I think even by some opinion polls, Australian Jews are more Zionist than Israeli Jews as a percentage, which is pretty incredible, right? So we have the most Zionist Jews in the world in Australia. And in America, even where there's a little bit more diversity of opinion, it's still like, 80, 90% of American Jewry is behind the state of Israel. So this narrative that there's really that much of a distinction between Zionists and Jews, I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, the overwhelming majority of Jews are Zionists in one capacity or another. But Yeah, but beyond that, it doesn't really make sense to separate Jewish identity from Zionism, because what the hell do you think Zionism is? It's Jewish identitarianism. It's that Jews should have their own state and Jews need to take care of themselves and so on. It's an expression of their identity. It's an expression of the Jewish interest and the Jewish culture. So yeah, these distinctions are just silly. But so these leftists go into the pro-Palestine movement and say, but we've got to incorporate some gay rights and some trans rights, and we got to get rid of the anti-Semitism. We're just anti-Zionist. Okay, the real problem is white supremacy and all this kind of stuff. Who's co-opting the movement? It's not me.
Right.
Like the average pro-Palestinian is probably actually got more in common with me than with you. Now, not that I think I'm not delusional about there being a one struggle. I understand that the Palestinians don't give a fuck about white people. They only care about themselves. And as you say correctly, it's true for all these ethnic groups. They come to the West and they just continue engaging in politics like as if they never left home.
Yeah.
I mean, you even get this with Greeks. Why is the Golden Dawn like this thing in Australia? Why is there a massive branch
Why
of
are
Golden
there
Dawn
grey wolves?
in Melbourne? Yeah, like if you want to come to Australia, why don't you just be an Australian? Join the Australian far right. What is Golden Dawn going to do in Australian politics? Nothing. It doesn't even make any sense. Go back to Greece. You know what I mean? So yeah, this is what you get, as you said. Like
Go break your dudes
globalization
out of
is not
jail.
creating a monoculture; it's just moving all the cultures around into each other's, or basically into our countries. So yeah, it is a total shit show and a contradiction. Contradictions layered upon contradictions. But what I think most interesting, I covered this on the show I did. Tom jumped on with me, but I covered it before Tom jumped on Thursday night, where I talked about the Andrew Bolt article in the Herald Sun that was published, I believe, on Wednesday. And Andrew Bolt did the same thing that we've seen from Elon Musk and Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson recently in the United States, calling out the Jews for aligning themselves with the political left and saying, you aligned yourself with the political left. Where's the left wing now? It's only the right wing that's going to defend Zionism in Israel. When are you guys going to get the message that we're the only team that's on your side? And that kind of thing. And he literally called out Mark Liebler directly for being an architect behind the Voice referendum, and just called out organized Jewry in Australia and said, why you keep aligning yourself with left-wing anti-white political causes, basically.
And why did you go after me with 18C? Why did you throw me to the wolves?
Yeah, basically that kind of thing. And what was interesting about it, and what I mentioned on the show, is that this is the cuck mentality of the right again, because if you're going to plead with the Jews when they betray you, please come back onto our team. Why would they respect you? They're not going to, they know that you're in the bag. You're sucking up to them. The left is not pleading to the Jews. Please, Jews, join the left wing. The left is like, fuck you. You're screwing over the Palestinians and so on. The Jews have to make an effort to win the left back. It's like you're playing hard to get. Like if you're if you're trying to get with a girl and she's going on a date with another man, you're like, please don't go on a date with him. I miss you and so on. She's not going to respect you. If you're like, bitch, like I ain't fucking going out with you ever again, like you're disloyal or whatever, then maybe she might be loyal. Maybe she might reconsider. So it's like literal cucks on the right, like Andrew Bolt, are not going to get anywhere with this kind of behavior. Yeah, but their nose is so far up the Jewish butthole, it's insane, and literal butt goy. But ultimately, I think the issue is interesting because just because this whole year has been a year really where the Jewish question has become increasingly mainstream globally in Australia in a way that it hadn't really for some time. I think a lot of headlines been driven by the role of Jews in society being questioned or challenged or flexed in various ways over the past 12 months, really. It was kind of kicked off by the whole Kanye thing, and it just kept kind of steamrolling from there, from one story to another, with the ban the ADL campaign and so on. And I think it's a really good thing. I think Australians in general now are a lot more conscious of the fact that Jews play an active role in our political system, and I think that's a great thing, because I think in many respects the the Jewish control of the narrative has really been dependent upon subtlety. And it's really been dependent upon it not even being seen as something that can be negotiated and analyzed critically in the public eye, but it subsists as like an assumption. And so I think it's just a positive thing in general, because the left wing is making the calculation. Wait a second, why are we pro-Israel? It doesn't actually make any sense. And the left has not been pro-Israel for some time, but we could see with Corbyn getting chucked out in the UK by the Jews, basically because he was pro-Palestinian, or Rudd getting basically tossed because he was insufficiently pro-Israel, and so on. The internal battle within the left is there, and I think it's only a matter of time before that internal battle on the right starts to come to the fore more, because young right wingers don't give a shit about Israel in the same way that boomers do, because they don't care about Judeo-Christian values. They don't care about, the only democracy in the Middle East, we have to protect it, and any of this nonsense. Younger right wingers are far more parochial, far more limited in their scope of concern to the West or just Australia. They don't care about the Middle East. They don't care about the proliferation of democracy around the world. They don't buy the Judeo-Christian nonsense. But most of them aren't really religious, which is unfortunate. But nevertheless, and a lot of the young people who are engaged with religion, they're not necessarily engaged with that kind of evangelical, kind of American style, Jewish compatible version of Christianity, right? The Jew filleting heretics that you see in the American evangelical movement. So they've really lost their grip. They've got their grip on the boomers, but they've really lost their grip in general on the conversation, and on the left and the right, I think, going forward. And that's really the real story, I think, here, which is that the contradictions internal to Jewish power, which is trying to do globalism and Zionism at the same time, well, that internal contradiction is really rearing its ugly head. And now what we're seeing in on the American right is the attempt at negotiating a white Jewish racial alliance, of basically including Jews under the classification of white. We can see this kind of rhetoric now, because Matt Walsh can't come out and say our Judeo-Christian values, because everyone will be like, you're a fake Catholic. He can't come out and talk about our only democracy in the Middle East. They'll be like, well, I thought you meant to be America first. What is this neocon nonsense? So now he's got to come out and say, well, the pro-Palestinians hate white people. They are aligned with BLM. And really what this is just anti-settler colonialism. It's the same anti-white rhetoric from the left, and so on. And so that's why we shouldn't be pro-Palestinian, because that would be aligning ourselves with anti-white forces. That's the new argument. And the fact that they have to make this kind of argument now means they've lost the argument. Because as soon as it becomes an explicit racial calculation, anyone who's really thinking in pro-white terms is going to very quickly start thinking in anti-Semitic terms, because one implies the other. So I feel pretty good about the position of the discourse, I think. But in terms of the way it's playing out in Australia this year, I think our job is shit on Israel, just keep hitting why the fuck is Israel our problem? What has Israel ever done for Australia? Literally nothing. Literally nothing. Why does Zionists control the Australian media? Why is Israeli intelligence operating in Australia? All these kinds of questions. It's our opportunity to raise these questions, and we're raising these questions at the same time that the far left media, that usually spends its time attacking us for being white supremacist, is raising the exact same questions. I saw Tom Tanuki attacking Aboriginal activists for being pro-Israel, because obviously Zionists control the Aboriginal activist scene.
Yeah, Marcia Langdon is doing that, isn't she?
Yeah. I saw him attacking Langdon. Yeah, I saw Crikey publish articles, which was like something from the Joel and Blair show or this program 6 months ago, talking about how Zionists control the Australian media, and all these top media executives are getting taken on trips to Israel all the time, and so on. So it's nice. It's nice to see, because it does legitimate a certain component of our narrative, and also at the same time, I think a lot of Australians are sitting there and just seeing these Semitic tribes have their argument, and they're just thinking, why the fuck do I need to care about this? It isn't my problem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. What is it doing here?
You
Why
get
is it in my
vindicated.
backyard?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why it's in our backyard is because of Jews, because the only reason why the Palestinians are mobilized and why they have support is because it is Western governments supporting Israel that maintains this whole project. So, that's the thing. It's like we wouldn't have to care if the Jews didn't force us to care. That's the only reason why there's a counter narrative. Like, no one cares about Armenians versus Azerbaijanis. No one cares about these other various ethnic disputes around the world because one side hasn't fully hijacked all the governments of the Western world and the media and is coordinating them into supporting one side against the other. So I think that's what, as long as we keep the discussion on that lens, you don't want to go too far overboard with the pro-Palestinian shilling, I think, because it can convey the wrong message. I think it's more important to be anti-Israel than pro-Palestine in your rhetoric. Not that I'm saying we got to shit on the Palestinians, but at the same time, we don't owe them anything either.
They're not our friends. We just have a mutual enemy.
Yeah, we should have neutrality towards Palestine, and we should have real kind of ambivalence or maybe slight sympathy. But towards the Israelis, towards the Zionists, we should have 100% animus. Because really, that's the thing. If the cultural task before us is not fighting the left. We're not even in a position to fight the left because we don't even have a right wing that stands for our race. So there's no point even trying to fight the left at this point because we don't even have a team. So the first job that we have to do is to fight the Jews for control of the right wing. Once we have control of the right wing, then we can focus on fighting the left. And so that's why it's so important to go hard on the Zionist issue, because that's really like it's not about the morality of the poor Palestinians and so on. Those arguments are there, that narrative is there, but what it's really about is about white people contesting Jews for control of the right-wing political culture, for the right-wing narratives, for the next generation of right-wingers and how they perceive the world. And so that's why the issue is important. That's why we can't just sit the issue out and say, oh, who cares? I fuck both sides. No, you have to engage with it because you have to engage with the reality of Jewish power in the Western world. And Zionism is an extension of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, earlier, just on the point that you started on, you're not just vindicated by common sense. You were vindicated in that analysis by the leaked phone calls from Greenblatt, who says, terrified, he says, this is no longer a left and right issue. We were able to, lean on the left and, and reliably trust the right. Now this has become an issue of old and young, and he's like, I really, really, really need to stress this. And he says, they're using Iranian talking points on TikTok. So yeah, no, if you want vindication, take it from the fucking demon's mouth. And I think Finian's maybe fixing himself something.
Sorry about that. I had my mic muted. There was something I was going to bring up from before, but I think it's it's a temporary alliance, we could say. We talked about Syrian girl at the beginning here. I hope no one thought that the racer was being pro-Syrian immigration or anything of the kind. But I do think there's a way of just reaching out to other groups in alliance. The Third Reich did have a cooperation with Japan to quite a significant extent. Hitler also met the Grand Mufti when it came to Jewish immigration to Palestine. So, yeah, temporary alliances can be formed. But,
when they 5,000 Indian SS volunteers for some fucking reason.
Yeah, Wehrmacht was very diverse. But I also just think, when they say, oh, you're hijacking the movement or whatever, it's like, well, okay, you're hijacking it with all this gay stuff. But also, I would say that when it comes to Arab politics, in Syria, there is the Social Nationalist Party, for example. The Ba'ath Party that started in Syria and then kind of went over to Iraq and all of that. That it was basically a mix of socialism and Arab pan-nationalism. They were actually very much influenced by third way politics, well, not third way, third positionist politics. So, also, I know that a lot of Jewish groups like to point out that the biggest selling book in the Middle East, obviously, is the Quran, but number two is Mein Kampf. And this is probably bullshit, but Israel was saying the other day when they went into the home of some Hamas fighter that they found a copy of Mein Kampf there. And we actually held it up, and it's in perfect condition. It looks like it just kind of came out of the wrapper. So it's obviously something they made up here. But no, I mean, look, I would say that one of those Muslims at the protests would be able to find a lot more common ground with me than he would with the bloody tranny, So, yeah, we're not hijacking the movement. Far from it.
Yeah. And also the other thing is in Australia, I mean, I get with Europeans where Muslims are the predominant non-white kind of demographic, they're more likely to feel the need to really kind of stand quite harshly against excessive Palestinian sympathy for obvious reasons. But in Australia, I think we can be kind of objective about the issue because Islam or Islamic demographics are kind of quite a small component of the overall non-white, demographic. And, you can say, well, Avi Yemeni is going to come out and cry about we're taking Palestinians into Australia. We shouldn't be taking Hamas terrorists in Australia. Or we've got to
1,800
deport.
Israelis in. 1,800 Israelis have been in.
But he's saying we got to deport the Hamas sympathizers or whatever. It's but he won't say anything about the hundreds of thousands of Indians pouring into the country. So it just shows where the priorities are. And the anti-Islam movement in Australia, I mean, I understand being anti-Islam, and I think it's positive when some normie white person, as part of their waking up process to racial consciousness. One phase that many of them will have to go through is a kind of, well, fuck the Muslims, and then they develop to from there, because that is obviously that's rooted in a kind of nativist sentiment, right? That's rooted in a pro-white in-group preference. But the problem with that is that it's not even in the top three threats, like racial threats to the country, and it's not going to work as a paradigm for fixing what's happening. People proposing that, we should go. This is normalizing mass deportation, so we should really jump on this, Zionist compatible anti-immigration narrative. It's I could understand that if you were Swedish or something, where almost all the immigrants are Muslims, right? But here, it's such a small portion that it doesn't make any sense. How is this going to deal with the Chinese problem? How is this going to deal with the Indian problem, the Filipino problem, the Negro problem, etc.? It's not. So we need to push narratives built around what is good for white people, what's good for white Australians, not try and riff off Jewish convenience. Not that I have a problem with deporting Muslims, of course not. But, I'm not going to help. I'm not going to put much energy into helping Jewish narratives to clean up the contradictions in the mess of the system that they have created. I think it's much more productive to be focused upon anti-Indian rather than anti-Muslim sentiment right now. Because, I've talked about this as well, that really, this is a little bit of a slight topic change, I guess, but so forgive me. But I've been talking about recently about how I think we need to focus more specifically on the Indian problem, on the PQ, if you will.
Absolutely.
Because they are now the largest demographic. They're overwhelmingly the largest amount that are coming in of the new entrants.
Yep. They're number one.
Yeah, by far the number one of the new entrants. I think they're number one overall, other than white people now as well. But they're definitely number one with new entrants. They're number one with births, birth mothers born outside of Australia. The largest non-Australian born demographic of birth mothers is Indian born birth mothers. I think
the cringiest
5.4% of Australian birth mothers in Australia now are Indian born. They're pouring in by the hundreds of thousands every year. these people hate white people. Indians have a deep anti-white animus, not just due to racial inferiority, which is one component of it, the kind of natural kind of seething, but also because we colonized their country. They're seething about that. We can see attitudes, not just in Australia, but Indians in the United States as well exhibit a lot of very leftist attitudes, align with the political left on most racial issues. We saw them vote for the one of the only demographics that voted yes. All the Indian suburbs voted yes in the voice referendum. We see in America, Indians are very supportive of BLM and pro-black kind of liberation, black victimological narratives, and so on. We also see in the United States, we see them sucking up to Jews. We see them engaging nepotistically in politics. They're basically, I call them poo Jews, because, Indians are like hardcore nationalists for India, but they are leftists in the West. And they nepotistically advance each other. They've taken over the tech companies in the US increasingly. And
so
if you look at
Jews,
and if you look at like by religious demographic in the United States, attitudes towards tech censorship, the most pro-censorship demographic is Hindus of any religion in the United States. I think only 9% of American Hindus were concerned that tech censorship is getting too excessive, which is by far the lowest number of any religious demographic. And the Hindus are the ones that took over. I mean, Musk took over Twitter, but before Musk took over Twitter, Indians were running Twitter. Indians were the ones that banned Trump off Twitter, and so on. Indians have advanced themselves through all the other big tech firms, and they're working high up at YouTube. They're working high up at Instagram and so on. The Indian janissary is a reality thanks to the H-1B visa program and Indian nepotism and so on. So anyway, that's an American issue, but it's a case which demonstrates what we're dealing with here as a biosphere. What we're dealing with here as a collective cultural mentality when it comes to Indians. They hate white people, and I argue with Indians online all the time. Whenever I make tweets about certain things, they pop up in the replies, and they make it very clear that we are evil colonialists. This country doesn't belong to us. We stole it from the Aboriginals, and we're evil colonialists who stole all this money and resources and killed all these Indians during the British Empire. And so they're taking our country off us because they feel entitled to it. That's how they feel. They're seething that we beat them at cricket. They're seething that they're brown and ugly and so on, and we're beautiful. The seethe will never end. And we're letting hundreds of thousands of them into the country every year, and they're colonizing it suburb by suburb, company by company, and so on. If you ever had to work in a corporate hierarchy with Indians, once one gets in, they just drag a whole bunch in behind them, and they all look after each other and cover each other's asses. Indian nepotism is an incredible threat. They're far more effective with nepotism than the East Asians. So that's the real concern. And once they get into government positions, they will do nothing at all to defend white people. They will just grift and work within the status quo. So we need to be very, very concerned about this. And we need to, I think, also the Australian people, when I talk to normies about Indians, they're pretty racist. They might not be politically racist, but they don't like Indians. They can smell it. They can feel it in their bones that there's something off. I think this is where we need to be focusing our energy, not on Muslims. If we're going to be focusing upon particular immigrant demographics that are a threat to Australia's future. So, I know that it's kind of a deviation from the Israel issue, but I think it's all related, because that's my response to the Avi Yemenis and the other kind of, the Australian, people who get duped by this, conservative, zog right, pseudo anti-immigration rhetoric.
Yeah, and when Avi Yemeni, it was him and Andrew Bolt were going on about how there was some poll published recently that showed roughly 70% of Palestinians support Hamas. But they were trying to say that, oh no, this particular area of Gaza is where you would have a lot of people sympathetic to Hamas, like, coming in. I'm like, well, look, if 70% are sympathetic, it doesn't really matter what part of Palestine or Israel that they come from. Basically, all of these groups are going to be loyal to a form of nationalism that we might see as extreme. And that's absolutely the case with Indians. I mean, Modi, came here recently, and I think it was it the MCG where he had like that huge crowd, like almost 100,000 Indians came out. It's like all of these people came out for the president of India, but this is not even India. Again, another one of the examples of where they're just taking their culture and their nationalism and moving it, but they're not changing it in any way. And they're certainly not changing their hatred of, say, Sikh people. We've seen that erupt in our streets quite seriously. And even political assassinations. That might have occurred in Canada, where they're going after these Sikh separatist groups. And yeah, I mean, historically, the UK was always the country where we've sourced most of our migration from. Now it's India. And it's India by a lot. And it's a lot of trade with India as well. We're importing all their cheap like textiles and clothing and everything. So yeah, no, definitely the Indian question has to be up there. So look, I just wanted to talk about two open letters that have been made here. This is still regarding Israel and Gaza. The first one, this is an open letter that was signed by a number of journalists, over 100 journalists. And I'll just read. What it called for was professional skepticism. And this was regarding allegations of war crimes, genocide, and ethnic cleansing and apartheid, that they are effectively, all of this is being attributed to Hamas and not to Israel. So I guess this was a bunch of lefty journalists, sort of in the same vein of Glenn Greenwald, saying that the Australian media is biased towards Israel. I mean, what do you guys think about that? I haven't watched too much of the TV news.
No,
no,
not at all, dude. Fuck no. I don't know why they cry this out all the time. They cry this out on the ABC. I still remember like the ABC getting caught saying like, Hamas released several Israeli children, and they got back several minors, several people below the age of 18. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Even SBS is just like, oh yeah, like Israeli did some bombings, but also like like Hamas has been like using human like civilian shields. It's like, can you use the same fucking type form for both of them? Really?
Human shields. It's like, oh, they just happened to be next to innocent people when we bombed them. They were using human shields. Like, it's just like a stupid concept in the first place. Like human shields, like what that even means. It's like what the Israelis expect is that the Hamas guys be like, hey, by the way, Israel, we're here, bomb us here. That we moved all the innocent people over there, and we're going to set up camp here with a giant sign that says Hamas, bomb here. Like how big is Gaza, by the way? It's like a very small strip of land with like 2 million people packed in, one of the most densely populated strips of land in the world. But somehow Hamas have to separate themselves completely from any other civilians whatsoever and advertise their whereabouts. Otherwise, they're using human shields. It's just totally fucking ridiculous. Obviously, it's incredible. But in addition to, I don't watch that much TV news because
it's brain
has time for that.
Shit.
But I did see it on the television the other night when I was at my parents' house having dinner, and it was just on the television in the background. And when they did bring up the subject, it was like, they showed like the release of the hostages to the Israelis and how wonderful it was and so on. And it was just kind of like depicted as, oh, isn't that nice? They got their, daughters and sons back and so on, and just showed the family hugging them moment and shit like that, right? And that was it. That was the whole story. So, that seems to be, I mean, I just saw one clip of one news clip, right? But, that seems to be what I would have expected from mainstream news to depict the story. This idea that they're showing Zionist atrocities every night and so on is just silly and ridiculous. One thing that I also noticed that was interesting when I watched the television news was they had a couple stories in a row. One was because I was in Victoria at the time, and one of the stories was there was a black wedding. This was recent, and there was a stabbing at the wedding. Basically, some Negro stabbed another Negro with a screwdriver, and I don't know if the guy died, but I mean it was pretty serious. So
He's in hospital.
fun, and so then they went from that story to the story we covered earlier, the release of the refugees. And then they showed like some black refugees or whatever, and I was like, I wonder, like, this is kind of like they showed the Israel story, and then they showed the damn Negroes. It's almost like, is the news trying to let off a little steam? Hey, Goy, don't you just hate these Negroes? Oh, but those Jews, they're just like you. But don't you hate these Negroes? They're stabbing each other, and they're gonna rape your kids and so on. You know what I mean? It almost had that connotation. I mean, again, maybe I'm being schizo. I don't want to be too conspiratorial about it, but it was kind of interesting to observe that as the boomers are sitting down and just like taking in the Zog programming for the evening, that a lot of people have been speculating that perhaps the Zog machine will permit a little white racism, if that's what's necessary to prop up a kind of Zionist sympathy. But anyway, I'll throw it back to you guys.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Nolzy, you might have just misheard me there. The ABC journalist was saying that they believe that there's too much pro-Israeli coverage. So,
no, that's what was going on. The ABC journalist.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant pro-Palestinian. My
okay,
apologies.
well then, yeah, they actually consult their own fucking journalists then.
Yeah.
There definitely is too much pro-Israeli, 100%, because Israel owns the media,
Right.
The Channel 9 executive, the Channel 7 executive, all these people have been taken on trips to Israel, and who knows what? Maybe they give them the Jeffrey Epstein treatment. I don't know what they do, but they're on board.
Yeah. It's a mixed bag. I mean, if you switch over to Sky News, obviously it is just 100% pro-Israel. There's no room to deviate from that. But I did see on, I think it was 7:30, they were talking about the Palestine school strike and that kind of thing. And they said that when it comes to social media, when it comes to people just, volunteering their own time with blogs and videos and whatever, it is overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian. And then there was just this one girl who did TikTok and Instagram videos, I think. And she was showing some of the comments on her videos. And it was saying things like, the only good Jew is a dead Jew. So she was still copying it pretty bad. And I think, the very fact that, Jews really freak out about what happens on the internet. And they've been trying to censor the internet for a very long time, and they've been successful to an extent. But the reason why is because, to the extent that the internet is available to everyone, it shows what a real grassroots movement is. A grassroots movement does not have influence at Sky News, for example. That's all bought and paid for. But when you're talking about everyday people who just want to upload a video giving their own 2 cents, and they're not backed financially by anyone, that's the grassroots, and it's overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian. And that is why I think is the main reason that Jews seem to be extremely nervous at the moment. And talking about how the only group that really supports hyper-Zionism is conservatives. It's not even just conservatives. It's this tiny fraction of the so-called hard right, but it's also the boomer right. There's a generational difference. I think Joel said before that younger supporters of the Liberal Party don't really care about Israel, and that's true. Well, I'm no fan of this guy, but the Aussie Cossack, he was talking about how he's getting a lot of people from the Australian right, and these are more the kind of anti-vaxxer types that they may not agree with everything we say. But nonetheless, they were coming on board as having a sort of right-of-centre perspective on the Israel-Palestine question, but siding with Palestine. And I don't think anything more demonstrates it than If you guys remember that show called Who Is America, it was done by Sacha Baron Cohen, Ali G, and Borat and all that.
Oh, fucking Christ, him.
But he there was a real lesson to be learned in that. He dressed up as a Mossad agent. I forget what that character was called, but he went after this like Republican congressman or something. I think he was only from the States, so he wasn't that well
Made
known.
him throw his ass out or some shit.
Yes, he got him to yell out the N-word. He got him to take his pants down and like they were doing training and stuff, and he had to move his ass into it. It was humiliating, obviously, for him. But why is it that Sacha Baron Cohen chose like an older conservative Republican? Because he would be the most likely to do what a Jew tells him to do. And he literally did everything that he was told to do. Pull his pants down, yell out the N-word, a bunch of other stuff as well. So if that is the only group that who supports you and the Zionist project, it's no wonder Jews are freaking out. And the ECAJ, for example, is said to be coming out with their report early this year, their report on anti-Semitism. We covered it, I think, in February. It's supposed to come out in December each year, and their last one was delayed. This one is actually going to be brought forward because of the rise in anti-Semitism. So, look, if you guys saw that link that I put in the chat, there's the other open letter I wanted to talk about was saying no to anti-Semitism in Australia. So this is another one of these open letters / petitions signed by over 600 people, but these are 600 important people. So it's people like Lachlan Murdoch, Kerry Stokes, Gladys Berejiklian, Steve Bracks, etc., saying, "We are leaders from diverse industries and professions across Australia. We cherish the Australian way of life, one which celebrates acceptance, cultural diversity, and the values of a modern, tolerant democracy." And so it says here that the ECAJ said that there has been a 482% spike in anti-Semitic incidents occurring in Australia this year. So they're saying that's basically from October 7, since the Hamas attack. And now they're saying, with renewed figures, that it's actually 591%. And that is the claim on the latest ECAJ annual report on anti-Semitism, which, like I said, is going to be brought forward. Now, this is also off the back of laws that are being pushed through by the Attorney General, our Jewish Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, where they are going to be criminalizing the swastika and Nazi gestures, like, raising your arm at a 45-degree angle. We already know that the states have done this. It's now illegal in New South Wales and Victoria. It's on its way in South Australia and Western Australia. But the federal government is doing it now as well. And the Shadow Attorney General, Michaelia Cash, came out and said this should have happened earlier. So they've absolutely got bipartisan support on all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I guess I went on a bit of a tangent with that one. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think that the Jews are really freaking out, so they're trying to kind of pull the levers of power a lot now. They're really, really trying to clamp down on all the speech that's out there by just writing it off as hate speech, because I think they're really, really nervous that they're losing their grip on power in Australia and around the world.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you closing out soon? Because I unfortunately need to go.
What's that? You got to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you all right to hold the fort with me, Joel, for another little bit?
Well, I mean, how much more do you want to get through? Because, I wouldn't mind wrapping things up pretty soon.
Okay, that's all right. Look, what I'll do is I think I'll just do there is a bit more to go through, but I can always just organize a catch-up episode. I was half expecting this because, like I said, 3 people on. We've all got something to say on each story. So, no, that's fine. We'll wrap it up there because I appreciate it's Friday night and we've all got lives to go and attend to. So, as I always do, Joel, anything you wanted to plug before we left it?
Yeah, people should go subscribe to my Substack, joeldavis.substack.com. And yeah, putting up some writings on there. I got some other projects in the works, which people will see manifest in the coming months. But that Substack, I've got a kind of series of a writing series that I'm putting out. So go subscribe there. And also, people might have noticed that my YouTube channel doesn't exist anymore. So you're going to have to catch my streams on Rumble. I'm also on Odyssey and other places, but Rumble is the main location to catch the streams. Thursday night show I do with Blair and other things. So go find me, Joel Davis, on Rumble. And obviously, follow me on Telegram or Twitter. At both places, my handle is Joel Davis X to keep up to date with what I'm up to. So it's probably the main stuff to plug.
All right, cool.
All right.
Yeah, and look, the racer should be moving on to Rumble soon. People have been telling me that for a couple of weeks now, especially because the future of Odyssey seems to be kind of unclear at the moment. And, we just need to kind of start using all of these alternative platforms a lot more because we need to make them viable. Like, I think actually what's cool about when I look at our stats for the racer, we get more views on Odyssey than we do on YouTube because we actually established a base there, and that's good to see. And I would rather people watch us on Odyssey than YouTube because, that way we're supporting the alternatives. But also, just because it's the 200th episode, I just wanted to say we're at the end of the year now, and the racer does have plans to sort of expand our operations starting next year. So, with the demise of XYZ and all of that, I think Joel would probably agree that there is a lack of Australian content out there. There's what we do, there's what Tom, Joel, and Blair do, and then what have you got? You've got like The Unshackled, run by a gay libertarian. There's not much out there. So we wanted to bring kind of revive the blog, get more articles out there, revamp the website, new graphics, all that kind of stuff. New live show as well we've got in the works. And there's a project that I've been working on as well, sort of in secret, and that should be ready by the beginning of next year. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to announcing that as well. Okay, guys, well, thank you for listening to episode 200. Thanks for everyone for their support in the 5 or so years that we've been doing this. The Racer.biz. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you soon.